I never imagined my office mistake would lock a millionaire doctor. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. I stood there, trembling hands hovering over the keyboard, heart racing. The glow of the computer screen illuminated my panic. One simple typo, one missed click, and in that moment, fate twisted its cruel hands. Dr. Nathaniel Gray, the esteemed millionaire surgeon known for his groundbreaking techniques and dazzling smile, was now on the other side of that door. His reputation loomed over the entire hospital. Even in the break room, whispers echoed like a passionate wind through the halls. I imagined his conversations with high-profile clients, celebrity clientele, people like him, people I could never be. The excitement in the air was palpable. And then there I was, caught in a whirlwind of mistakes that didn't just end my day but twisted into a chaos I never thought possible. Lockdown initiated, the automated voice echoed from the intercom, cutting through the silence, a metallic clank echoed, sealing doors. My stomach dropped. I didn't just mess up his morning, I locked down the whole hospital. Patients were stuck in limbo, nurses murmured their disbelief, and I felt like the ground beneath me was crumbling. The fluorescent lights seemed brighter, the air felt heavy, suffocating. Why was this happening? My mind raced. I thought of Lisa, my best friend, her enthusiasm for doing good and making a difference. Now, her face flickered in my mind like a haunting specter. How would I tell her? How would I ever face anyone again? I can't believe this. Someone yelled from the end of the corridor. I could hear footsteps rushing. My heart fluttered. What would they think? The shame pressed down on me like a dark cloud. I was about to step into a storm of judgment. As the minutes stretched into what felt like hours, Dr. Gray's muffled voice pierced through the door. Get this sorted out. His tone was sharp, demanding. Normally calm, he was now a tempest, and I was the eye of it. I could feel my palms sweating, the taste of bile creeping up my throat. What had I done? I wanted to run, to hide. Instead, the reality gripped me tighter. My best efforts failed me. My heart sank, churning with regret. I was the vessel of chaos. He was the hero who saved lives, and here I was, reduced to an administrative blunder. But what would happen next? A million questions flooded my thoughts, shadows creeping through the corners of my mind. What if Dr. Gray never forgave me? Could I ever recover from this blunder? I could almost see the headlines: hospital mishap, office worker fuels chaos. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The minutes dragged on in agonizing silence, each second stretching painfully. The hospital, usually alive with the rush of patients and the comforting hum of medical equipment, felt like a tomb. My back pressed against the wall, an involuntary exile from the world I once navigated with ease, the clumsy choreography of administrative tasks now a nightmarish prison. Suddenly, the intercom crackled to life, breaking the suffocating silence. Attention, all staff. Please remain calm. We are assessing the situation. It was a nurse's voice, offering vague reassurance as chaos erupted anew outside. Panic rippled through the building, creating a palpable tension that seeped into my skin. I could hear hushed murmurs, the uneasy shuffle of feet, and muffled arguments. Dr. Gray's booming voice rose above the others, sharper than before, resonating with frustration. I need information. This is unacceptable. Lives are at stake. With each syllable, my heart sank deeper, merging with the knot of fear and guilt twisting in my stomach. What if his anger didn't just fade away? What if all the care he gave, the lives he touched, turned to scorn for a simple oversight. Just then, I felt a presence beside me. I turned to find Jenna, a seasoned nurse with silver-streaked hair, whose sharp gaze softened for a moment as she caught my eye. Her focused demeanor contrasted with the turbulent emotions swirling within me like a whirlpool. "Well, fix this," she said, surprisingly calm. Her voice was steady, like a lighthouse guiding lost ships to shore. "Fix this?" I echoed, desperation spilling over. "I created this. I messed everything up." I was teetering on the edge of tears, fighting to hold back waves of humiliation. Her hand rested reassuringly on my shoulder. "We all make mistakes. This situation doesn't define you." A wave of warmth momentarily soothed the storm within. Jenna had weathered 1,000 storms in her career, yet here she stood, offering kindness instead of judgment. At that moment, I felt a flicker of hope, igniting a brief respite from the suffocating darkness. The automated lockdown alarm ceased its clamoring as the tension transitioned into hushed whispers that filled the hallways. A group of nurses and doctors pooled together to strategize, their chatter blending into a cacophony of urgency and hope. Yet, with every moment that passed, I felt the weight of my wrongdoing settle back onto my shoulders. As I stepped closer to the door, the battered white paint peeling in smudged sections around the handle caught my eye, a reminder of all the things I've ignored, like the exhausting pressure I'd been feeling ever since I started this job, striving to prove myself worthy. My heart raced again, not only from fear but also from the looming realization that perhaps I was in over my head. A sudden crash echoed in the distance, followed by scattered gasps, and then silence fell like a shroud. Dr. Gray's voice erupted once more, sharp and insistent, yet tinged with an unfamiliar hue. "Someone get those doors open." At that moment, feeling an urge to take action, I tossed my fear aside. I rushed out, ready to confront our chaotic reality with a newfound tenacity. As I neared the group of physicians, I straightened my posture, pushing back the fabric of self-doubt that clung to me like a second skin. My heart whispered the familiar allure of hope, nudging me forward despite the odds. "We need to contact security," I suggested, forcing the words out despite the quiver in my voice. "There has to be an override for situations like this." Dr. Gray turned sharply, the storm in his eyes meeting mine. "You think?" He glanced at the screen of his tablet, the exact moment I could see the rapid flicker of recognition in his face, the lines of frustration softening just a fraction. Every person stood still, the tension rolling like thunder ready to break. "Let's try, please," I urged. There was a raw vulnerability in my plea that seemed to break through the hard shell surrounding us. A moment of silence stretched, my heartbeat echoed like the impending storm, and then, as if on cue, the door suddenly rattled, the security team's voice resonating through the intercom. "We have the override. Stand by." A tide of relief washed over the room, entangled with a fresh wave of dread. What would come next? Would I still be their scapegoat, or could I be seen as a contributing force to unraveling this crisis? In the corner of my eye, I caught Dr. Gray's gaze settling on me, no longer entirely filled with wrath. As the door began to creak open, the world outside filled with possibility and ambiguity awaited. I felt a sudden mix of fear and exhilaration. If I could survive this moment, maybe I could learn to rise from the ashes of my mistakes. But then, just as the door flung open, my phone buzzed violently in my pocket. I fished it out, my pulse quickening with anticipation. A text message flashed urgently across the screen, shattering the air of expectation that surrounded me. "We need to talk. It's important. Lisa." My breath hitched, and I stumbled back a step, the world spinning slightly as newfound anxiety intertwined with the realities of my blunder. What could possibly be so important? My heart raced as a sense of foreboding crept back in, tightening its grip just as I felt like I was finally starting to cut the ties of chaos. As I looked back at the doorway, the weight of my choices loomed larger than ever, promising a journey filled with both peril and uncharted paths ahead. The world erupted into confusion as the door swung open, revealing the security team bathed in the harsh glare of fluorescent lights. Their uniforms caught the eye, badge emblazoned with authority and urgency. I couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling lodged in my throat. The nervous anticipation felt both thrilling and paralyzing. "Step back," one of the officers barked, his voice snapping me back into focus. Freeing the path, Dr. Gray and the other staff quickly formed a human shield in front of the doorway, ready to meet whatever awaited us on the other side. As I watched the group huddle protectively, another wave of guilt crashed over me. Perhaps this was my doing. Had my mistake put everyone in jeopardy? I felt the eyes of my colleagues shift towards me, a mixture of concern and curiosity as they wondered what role I would play in the aftermath of this crisis. With every heavy second ticked past, I wrestled with an uneasiness deep inside. Then, the first figure stepped into view, outlined against the pale glow of the hallway beyond, a tall man in scrubs, his face taut with determination. His eyes locked onto Dr. Gray's, an unspoken exchange occurring between them. They shared the burden of loss and the weight of lives that mattered. Dr. Gray, the doctor said, voice steady. "We need to stabilize the patients in Ward 3. The situation is escalating." There's no time for the tension shifted, a collective inhale of horror as the volume of the crisis outside crescendoed. My heart quickened as the officer turned to face us. "We're implementing a full lockdown protocol. No one leaves the premises until a full assessment is complete." Fear flooded through me, painting the walls of my mind with darkness. I glanced around, searching for Jenna, hoping to hear her calming voice reassure me, but instead, I found the room spinning with chaos. My breath hitched, the sense of entrapment spiraling into a panic, but despite the panic, a flicker of determination ignited, a reminder of Jenna's words. "We all make mistakes." So I kept my feet planted, willing myself to face whatever would come. As the room simmered with anxiety, I noticed someone moving towards me. It was Lisa, the person who had sent the cryptic message that hung heavily in my mind. Her eyes, usually sparkling with mischief, seemed muted today, reflecting a depth of concern that clenched my heart. "You got my message." It wasn't a question, but rather an acknowledgement of the weight pressing down on both of us. I did. What's going on?" I stammered. She hesitated, glancing around the room as if weighing her options. "It's about the corporate staff. They're anxious about the financial fallout. Your mistake, it's not small." The words spilled out, taut with urgency, but her soft voice bore the hint of empathy. "Please, I need you to understand there's more to this than meets the eye." "What do you mean?" I pressed, desperation edging onto my voice. "What more can there be?" Lisa leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "There are investors involved. Big names. If they turn against us, it won't just be lives at stake, it's the future of this hospital." Her brow furrowed, eyes glistening like twin stars wrestling under the weight of 1,000 fears. "We can't let them pull funding. This place means too much. Is that why they're so frantic? Because of money?" I asked, the realization striking me like a blow. The urgency wasn't purely about the patients anymore, it was about power, control, an entire system teetering on the brink of collapse. "Exactly." Lisa sighed, her shoulders slumping slightly. "There's suspicion surrounding the administration, they fear the fallout will bleed into every corner of operations. We need to set this right, for the patients and the ones we care about." With her words echoing in my mind, I turned back to the group assembled near the entrance. I could still feel Dr. Gray's eyes assessing me, contemplating how I fit into this unfolding crisis, this uneven dynamic of chaos and responsibility. Hope flickered weakly in my chest. Was there truly a way for us to navigate through this storm, or would I drown beneath the weight of my mistakes? Again, I grasped at the remnants of determination, swaying between hopelessness and resolve, yet just as I settled into my contemplations, another commotion broke out among the staff. Dr. Gray's voice raised again, this time laced with frustration. "We can't get complacent. We need everyone to contribute. This isn't just a job, this is our home, our duty." The passionate call to action stirred everyone into motion, igniting a sense of camaraderie amid the chaos. As I took a step towards him, every ounce of hesitation melted away. "I'll help," I shouted, conviction threading through my body. "Whatever it takes." But just as the air thickened with burgeoning determination, a sudden blast of sirens sliced through the stillness, loud and disconcerting. My chest tightened as the realization broke over me like a cold wave. This wasn't just about us anymore. I turned to Lisa, my heart pounding wildly. What if this is about more than the hospital? What if they're coming for us? Her expression shifted, dread washing over her features. "Then we need to get organized now. We can't let fear dictate our actions." Not when lives hang in the balance. Before we could strategize further, a voice blared through the intercom, fractured and frantic. "Attention. We have a situation outside that requires immediate attention. All personnel, prepare for lockdown. Follow security protocols." The door slammed shut behind us with an ominous finality, and an unbearable weight settled over the room. The reality was now clear. We were at the heart of something larger, something volatile that wouldn't merely fade into the background with time. In that moment, I understood with chilling clarity that my past mistakes had stepped into a larger nightmare, one that would set forth uncharted paths and unknown consequences. All that remained was to brace for impact, uncertain of what the next moment would unravel. As moments slipped into haunting silence, the reality of our situation sank deeper. The fluorescent lights above hummed softly, a disconcerting contrast to the turmoil brewing within me. I felt the collective anxiety of my colleagues as they shifted nervously, echoing the violence of our predicament. With each tick of the clock, the weight of previous decisions burgeoned heavier on my chest. "Are they really coming for us?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper as I locked eyes with Lisa, who appeared resolute yet shaken. "I don't know," she replied, her gaze darting towards the closed door as if expecting a violent intrusion. "But if the investors think something is wrong, if they think there's a chance they could lose their investment in this place." Abruptly, the intercom crackled again, slicing through our murmurs, the voice from earlier much more urgent. "Repeat, all personnel must be at their assigned stations immediately. We have a containment breach that requires full lockdown protocols." I repeat. My heart sank. Containment breach? The words reverberated through my mind, colliding violently with snippets of our world, moments of laughter in hallways, patients' hopes, the warmth of shared lunches in the break room. They felt light years away now, overshadowed by this impending threat. "Everyone get to your teams," Dr. Gray shouted, snapping us out of our fearful trances. The urgency in his voice rallied us into motion as we hurried towards our respective stations, forming a protective perimeter in the face of unknown dangers. We huddled into our small groups, each of us nervously glancing at our phones, hoping for any form of news or revelation. I could see that while some clutched at their devices with white knuckles, others stared into the distance, lost in a maelstrom of thoughts and fears. Jenna was supposed to be on break. A splash of hope surged when I thought about her. "Where's Jenna?" I croaked out, scanning the small space. "She should be with the admissions team," Lisa replied, her lips pressed into a thin line. "But we need to focus on us right now, on the patients. They can't know what's happening out here. If we show them fear, they'll panic." A collective resolve solidified in my chest as I nodded. We were not just co-workers, we were a family, and I needed to step up regardless of the gnawing guilt that clung to me. I couldn't undo my actions, but perhaps I could mend the fragments and shield those around me. It was a fragile thread of hope, but it was enough. As we moved closer to the ward area, the clatter of footsteps echoed behind us. A nurse darted into view. Sarah, her eyes wide with anxiety. "They're coming!" she exclaimed, her voice spilling with urgency. "I just heard them talking on the radio. They might try to evacuate if things escalate." My heart dropped. Evacuate? Would that mean abandoning our patients? But even as the thought spiraled in my mind, I was assailed by another notion. Would we have a choice? "Then we need to prepare them," I asserted. "Prepare them for the worst, so if it comes to that." The words trailed off, leaving a sickening void behind. Dr. Gray, striding forward with determination, shot me an encouraging glance. "You're right. Our duty extends beyond just those who stand in front of us. We must be their shield, regardless of what awaits us. Encouraged, I found myself swept up in the tide of activity. I helped distribute anxiety-calming medications, moving from bed to bed and ensuring we maintained a calm atmosphere despite the raging storm on the other side of those walls. Small acts of kindness emerged from the chaos. One nurse brought in extra pillows for comfort, while another shared a moment to hold a patient's hand and reassure them everything would be all right. With every encounter, fragments of hope sprouted against the despair that threatened to suffocate us. Just as I settled into helping our patients, a commotion echoed from the hallway, and the doors swung back open. I turned to see armed security personnel rushing past us, their expressions grim. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. The dread thickened in the atmosphere. They weren't just protecting the hospital, they were bracing for a confrontation. What's happening? I called to one of the officers, but my voice was lost amid the chaos, drowned out by shouts and the metallic click of equipment. Anxiety coiled tighter in my chest as fear crept back in, a paralyzing reminder of my own mistakes. Then the most unexpected sound broke through the cacophony, the distant cries of a baby echoing from the nursery. The sound clawed at my heart, each wail piercing through the layers of panic. In that moment, a realization unfurled within me, belief that the innocence of life must prevail amidst turmoil. Suddenly, the overhead lights flickered, plunging us into a moment of darkness before an urgent voice boomed through the intercom once more, "All personnel to the main lobby for immediate lockdown." I repeat, all personnel to the main lobby. Panic surged anew, but before I could fully process what it meant, another shout broke through the air, this one tinged with urgency and fear. "They found the breach." A chilling realization took hold of me. We were on the brink of collapse, and our past missteps were about to resurface in the most catastrophic of ways. The weight of my mistake loomed larger than ever, threatening to overshadow all the small moments of hope we had just built, and as I stood wavering on the edge of fear and determination, ready to fight for the lives we could save, an unexpected figure appeared at the entrance of our ward. Jenna. Her face, pale but resolute, seemed to embody both dread and defiance. "Look out!" she yelled just as the lights flickered again, plunging us into darkness. I felt the ground shake beneath me, the finality of our decisions looming ominously above us. My heart raced, and I instinctively reached out for Jenna's hand, gripping it tightly because whatever storm awaited us, we had no option but to face it together, even as shadows crept closer around us. The darkness didn't simply envelop us, it consumed every flicker of hope I had managed to kindle in the moments before. My heartbeat thudded in my ears like a war drum, echoing against the chaotic backdrop of muffled voices and frantic footsteps. I could feel Jenna's hand squeezing mine, anchoring me against the encroaching waves of despair. "Stay close." I managed to shout into the dark, my voice a feeble attempt to pierce through the suffocating uncertainty. I could barely see faces, just fleeting shadows darting about, but I knew we had to rally together if we were going to weather this storm. As if by instinct, we began to inch toward the sound of panicked voices, my mind racing with the possibilities of what lay ahead. What exactly did breach mean? The uncharted territory ignited confusion, with each racing thought colliding recklessly like toy soldiers in a battle. "Here!" Jenna's voice cut through the clamor. The faint outline of an emergency flashlight flickered to life in her hand, illuminating our path. "Follow me." I felt a surge of relief washing over me. Jenna had always been a steady presence, or at least she had been until today's events. But today was different, today was fractured. The darkness weaved around us like a malevolent spirit, and with it came the anxious uncertainty that accompanied every footfall. As we reached the lobby, the fluorescent lights buzzed back to life, but they seemed dimmer somehow, as if even the lights were reluctant to fully illuminate what lay ahead. In the midst of the chaos, a few familiar colleagues stood around, eyes wide, clinging desperately to whatever semblance of order they could muster. "We need to evacuate the vulnerable patients before it escalates further," Dr. Gray urged, his brow furrowed with steely determination. "The backup generators should kick in any moment, but we have to act fast." Just then, the room filled with shouts and cries, a mix of authority and fear coiling tightly together, creating an insurmountable tension. Security personnel swarmed through the entrance, murmurs of imminent danger cascading throughout the room like a chilling symphony. Is it true? Are they really after us? One nurse whispered, her hands trembling as she gripped her clipboard. What happens if they find the breach? They can't just stay calm. Dr. Gray interjected, and in the clamor, I caught Jenna's worried expression, masked by a veneer of hope. We won't abandon anyone. This is our responsibility. We can protect them, but as he spoke, the atmosphere thickened with uncertainty, gnawing at the edges of our resolve. Just as I began to regain a sense of purpose, a piercing scream erupted from the farthest corner of the lobby, a sound so raw it felt like a knife carving into our very souls. I turned sharply, spotting a young nurse kneeling beside a patient who had fainted, panic threading through the crowd as whispers erupted about what had just occurred. Get the medical cart! I shouted, a sense of urgency propelling me forward. Jenna was at my side in an instant, her dedication a lifeline amidst turmoil. Nodding, she sprinted off to gather supplies. I dropped beside the stricken patient, kneeling on the cool tile floor. The nurse looked at me with wide eyes. There was fear, but it was mingled with trust. Stay with me, I whispered to the patient as I checked for responsiveness, my trembling hands seeking reassurance in the midst of chaos. The world around us swirled and flickered like an unstable flame, uncertainty igniting every pore of my being. Help is on the way, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. A small part of me longed to believe my own words. I looked over my shoulder to find Dr. Gray directing security personnel. The bright flash of red and blue lights cascading through the hospital windows reminded us that the outside world was no longer safe. As Jenna returned with the cart, the urgency showcased itself in her eyes. What's the status? She asked breathlessly. Not stable. We need to get her on oxygen, I replied, my focus narrowing in on the task at hand. The world beyond felt distant, a mere ghost of what we once knew. I in the whirlwind, something stirred deep within me. The weight of regret pressed on my chest, but in caring for other 7 in this high-stakes chaos there emerged a semblance of redemption. I wasn't just the architect of my troubles, I could be part of the solution, even if it was a flicker in the shadows threatening to swallow us, but inexorably, the shadows were closing in. A sudden hush fell upon the crowd, palpable dread filling the air. The overhead lights flickered dangerously again before plunging us back into darkness. My hand instinctively reached out for Jenna, our connection tight and unyielding. Can you hear that? I murmured as a low rumble echoed through the hallway, steadily growing louder. It felt like the very ground beneath us was protesting against whatever was advancing, the portent of doom heralding chaos, and then, through the darkness, a pair of cold, shimmering eyes peeked through the cracks of the lobby doors, something sinister lurking just beyond. Get ready, Dr. Gray whispered, his voice low but fierce. Whatever happens, we stand united. But as another echoing shout reverberated in the distance, familiar, yet threatening, a realization struck me with a sickening clarity. It was a voice I recognized, one that could tear apart whatever fragile facade of hope we had fought to hold together. I began, the truth clawing its way to the surface, as the door edged further open, shadows stretching into the lobby, shadows I had once foolishly underestimated. And just like that, we were caught in the crosshairs of a nightmare I had never imagined, one that would test every fiber of our resolve. The air was thick with anticipation, a stifling haze of confusion and dread that wrapped around us like a suffocating cloak. My heart raced, the echo of the familiar voice ringing sharply against the walls of my mind, a cruel reminder of past mistakes I could not shake off. No, it can't be, I whispered, half preparing to turn and flee, half hoping that I could wake up from this ghastly reverie. Stand down. Dr. Gray commanded, his voice steely as ever, but his eyes betrayed the anxiety simmering beneath the surface. We braced ourselves, united but trembling, awaiting the figures that loomed just beyond the threshold. The door creaked open slowly, revealing the figure of a tall man shrouded in the dim light. His presence sent shockwaves through the room, and I could feel the panic ripple across my colleagues. As he stepped forward, his face became clearer, the sharp features, the the cold blue eyes, the same ones I had failed to unread in my nightmares. It was Dr. Crawford, the very doctor whose swift ascent in the field had compelled me to question my own merit, whose arrogance had always danced dangerously close to malice. Dr. Crawford, I breathed, horror coiling tightly in my gut. What are you doing here? He grinned, an unsettling crook of his lips that sent shivers along my spine. Oh, I've come to clear up a little confusion, he replied, glancing around the room as if inspecting his domain. You see, someone has to take responsibility for the mess you've all made. Back off. Jenna shouted, stepping protectively in front of me as if her resolve could physically repel him. You have no right to be here, isn't that sweet? He derided, his voice oozing with feigned affection. But you see, this is a little more complicated than you think. I'm not here for a chat, and you all are dangerously close to an irreversible mistake. The murmurings of fear returned, echoing softly like a haunting chorus. I couldn't shake the feeling that the very air had changed, thickening with uncertainty like a palpable fog. Leave while you can, Dr. Gray interjected, stepping forward. You're not welcome here, but Dr. Crawford merely chuckled, a sound that made me squirm. In an instant, he adjusted his posture, the air around him vibrating with an unsettling authority. He lifted an arm, making a sweeping gesture toward the hallway that led further into the depths of the hospital. Trust me, you're going to want to listen to what I have to say. We have unfinished business, and it seems fate has sent me to tie up loose ends. The darkness seemed to grow with his every word. No amount of bravado from Dr. Gray or the nurses could mask the truth that loomed ahead. The mounting dread coiled around us like a serpent, each heartbeat resonating with uncertainty about what he intended to reveal. I understand you consider yourselves guardians of this place, but reality is far more complex, he continued, his voice a smooth caress that belied the storm brewing beneath the surface. You misunderstand the threat here, and I cannot allow that to continue. People's lives enough. I blurted out, fingers trembling with anger and fear. You lost your chance to control everyone's fate. Not after everything you've done. He narrowed his eyes, a fleeting flicker of fury dancing across his face. You really have no idea the game you've been playing, do you? A nagging thought gnawed at the edges of my mind as I searched his expression for any hint of sincerity, for any shred of hope within the chaos. Jenna shot me a concerned glance, fear mixing with determination in her gaze. But all I could feel was a wave of doubt cascading over very doubt that had led me to freeze in moments of crucial decision-making. Is this what you wanted, Dr. Crawford? I asked hesitantly, hoping against hope that he would relent. To toy with lives for your ambition? What do you gain from this? He smirked, lips curling into an eerie smile. Ambition? More like a means to an end. My end, and your failure, is arriving faster than you think. His words felt like a match struck against the backdrop of dark oil. They erupted in my chest, igniting anger and a smoldering fear that crawled under my skin. Before I could respond, a sudden crash interrupted the moment, sending everyone in the lobby reeling back. The faint flicker of the emergency lights died completely and shadows lumbered in from the hallway, figures cloaked in darkness. Brace yourselves. Dr. Gray shouted as he pushed us backward, his movements punctuated by the chaos unfolding. Shouts broke through the darkness, but amidst the cacophony, something caught my attention. In the far corner, an old friend from my residency days, Sam, the resident I once confided in about my struggles, was stumbling toward us, panic in his eyes and blood streaming from a gash on his forehead, the symbol of a battle he hadn't anticipated. Help! He gasped, collapsing against the wall. Sam! What happened? I rushed forward instinctively, kneeling beside him. The world around me blurred, emotions tangling in the fray as I fumbled for clarity amongst the chaos. Dr. Crawford's voice, slick and venomous, cut through the air once again. You can't save everyone, remember that. As I looked back at Sam, I found Jenna at my side, her hand steadying my shoulder as we worked together to assess the injury. But the looming dread wrapped tighter around us, the steady march of hostile figures advancing, and certainly, you can't save yourself from your own mistakes, Crawford added, his tone triumphantly grim. In that moment, the realization hit me like a hammer to glass. Everything I had worked for, everything I fought to protect was unraveling, slipping through my fingers as if it were sand. Resentment flooded my veins, and I looked towards Crawford, knowing deep down that this confrontation was only the beginning of a horrific battle. Just as hope flickered like a candle in the wind, uncertainty loomed ever closer. The darkness around us felt alive, hungry. And as Sam's eyes met mine, desperation hanging heavily in the air, I knew that tonight would change everything. The world felt suffocatingly small, closing in on me as I knelt beside Sam. The din of chaos echoed louder, almost drowning out the racing thoughts in my mind, but I couldn't quite comprehend the sounds: cries, alarms, the scrapes of heavy boots on the floor. All that resonated was the urgency of the moment, the blood trickling from Sam's wound, and the heat of 1,000 unspoken fears. "Stay with us, okay?" I murmured, pressing my fingers against the gash, the blood too warm against my skin, an unsettling reminder of the fragility of life. Jenna worked deftly beside me, her hands steady despite the terror swirling around us. Help is coming, but every second felt like an eternity, a cruel reminder of how quickly things could go wrong. Sam's face was pale, glistening under the erratic emergency lights. They're coming," he gasped, shivers racking his frame, and I felt the weight of every word pressing down on me. Don't think about that now. We just need to get you stabilized." I interjected, trying to project confidence that I barely felt. Dr. Gray's voice rose above the chaos, sharp and unyielding. "We need to move him. There's no time." His authoritative stance inspired a flicker of resolve, but it was overshadowed by Crawford's mocking laugh, slicing through the air like a sharpened blade. "Who are you even trying to fool?" Crawford taunted, his eyes glittering with wicked delight. "You think you can stitch the breaks? That you can patch up this mess? You've all been blinded by your own naivety." I shot him a fierce glare, fueled by anger and fear. "What do you want, Crawford? Enough games. Lives are at stake here." The outburst surprised even me, but the weight of the moment clamped onto my chest, demanding release. Unfazed, he stepped forward, his shadow pooling over Sam, darkening the flicker of hope we clung to. "What I want," he drawled slowly, savoring the moment. "What I need, my dear colleagues, is for you to understand the true nature of the beast that you're dealing with." His voice lowered, all mockery gone. "You think you're fighting for the patients. But you're only puppets in a very dangerous play." Another crash from the hallway sent the tension spiking through the air. Dr. Gray turned to coordinate a plan, but something in Crawford's demeanor held my gaze captive, an unsettling confidence that begged me to dig deeper, to unearth the motivations beneath his venomous facade. "Crawford, you're not invincible," I challenged, my heart pounding as Jenna secured a makeshift bandage around Sam's wound. "This isn't a game for you to win. People will suffer because of you. I am not the one who put us in this situation, sweetheart," he retorted coolly, eyes narrowing with dark amusement. "That title belongs to you and the giant blunder you made in your office. Did you honestly think the truth would stay hidden forever?" Those words hit like a freight train, a cruel reminder of the errors that haunted me. The memory flashed across my mind, the decision that spiraled so out of control, the hastily made choices I had tried to bury under layers of good intentions. I felt the whisper of anxiety creep back in, a shadow I couldn't escape, but amidst the turmoil, I saw the flickering lights in Sam's eyes starting to dim. "Get him out, now!" I shouted, pushing against the panic threatening to consume me. Jenna nodded, and together we worked to lift Sam, his weight heavy with the weight of our fears. As we moved, I kept stealing glances at Crawford, trying to decipher his next move. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was toying with us, relishing the fear that crackled in the air like static. But a part of me knew that I couldn't let him win, couldn't afford the luxury of doubt. "Help us!" Jenna shouted toward a group of hospital staff huddled nearby. Speeches of bravery echoed, but the fear reflected just as clearly. They rushed to our side, helping us maneuver Sam toward the safety of the nurse's station, but the sense of urgency weighed heavy on my shoulders. Just as we reached the narrow hallway leading to the emergency ward, I turned back, feeling the oppressive weight of Crawford's gaze. "You have no idea what you've unleashed," he taunted, the corners of his mouth twisting into a smirk as dark energy swirled around him. "Things are about to get far worse." My chest constricted, understanding now that he had embedded himself in our lives like a virus, waiting patiently to fester in the darkest corners of our minds. The world wasn't just closing in, it was transforming into something sinister. With each step, I felt the gnawing realization settle into my bones. What if this outbreak was only the surface? What if the danger we faced beneath Crawford's smirk was far more insidious than any of us had realized? The answers were there, lingering at the edge of my consciousness, but I was too afraid to pull them into the light. As we finally arrived at the nurse's station, I heard a thunderous crash from the vicinity we had just escaped. Heart racing, I turned back in dread, the ominous realization dawning on me: the shadows were advancing, and our shelter might soon become a prison. In that breathless moment, as hope flickered and uncertainty loomed ever larger, I understood that survival was no longer guaranteed. It was a battle I wasn't sure we could win. And just then, the emergency lights flickered a final time, plunging us into an abyss of darkness, leaving the fate of all our lives hanging by a delicate thread. The darkness felt alive, swallowing any semblance of safety. I froze, adrenaline surging through my veins as chaos erupted behind us. Jenna's grip on Sam tightened, but as I scanned the shadows closing in, reality weighed heavily on me, like an anchor pulling me beneath. "Stay close." Dr. Gray barked, urgency edging his voice while the nurse's station lights flickered erratically. A scream sliced through the air, raw and agonizing, an echo of despair that felt tethered to us even in this moment. The delicate thread we were hanging by frayed at the edges, and I could barely breathe as dread wrapped around me like a vice. "Are you okay?" Sam's voice, still weak and struggling, cut through my spiral of dark thoughts. He looked at me with those dimming eyes, and in his gaze, I saw not only my friend but 1,000 unsaid words, 1,000 unanswered hopes. "Keep talking, Sam. Keep your mind focused," I urged, willing any strength I had to pour into his fading spirit. "Tell me about that ridiculous dog you've been thinking of adopting. The one you told me about last week, the golden retriever." He managed a faint smile. "Her name would be, what was it?" "Sunshine." "Yeah, Sunshine," he breathed, even as his voice quaked with pain. "She would have the sweetest smile, just like yours." It was a small moment of light amid the encroaching darkness, but suddenly it felt like a fragile wall against the looming terror outside. Through the noise, I could hear the echoes of footsteps, forceful and determined, but they were mixed with the unmistakable sound of uncontrollable chaos. Those sounds merged into a cacophony that added a new layer of panic in my chest. The uncertainty of our situation gnawed at me like a voracious beast, and the very notion that Crawford was somehow calculating our doom layered dread upon dread. I turned back to Jenna, still trying to keep Sam stable, her brow creased in concentration. "We have to get him help fast," I urged, the movement around us becoming frantic as more staff closed in, their faces reflecting our shared fear. Just then, sirens pierced the dimness, rising in a crescendo both familiar and foreign, an unnerving reminder of all that had begun to unravel within these walls. "Ambulance!" one of the nurses shouted, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and terror. But as we struggled to keep Sam upright, I couldn't shake the ominous conclusion forming in my mind. "Wait, are we sure?" I hesitated, the thought solidifying into a chilling acknowledgement. "What if it's not safe out there? What if Crawford has tampered with them too?" Jenna's eyes widened, realization against her optimism. "We can't think like that," she insisted, but her voice wavered as she bit her lip, uncertainty dancing in her gaze. The sirens rang louder now, echoing noise that seemed to grow more sinister with each passing moment. Sam groaned, "Just get me to the door." The tension in the air crackled, and I could feel the chaos beyond our immediate circle, like a storm gathering for a final, explosive confrontation. "On three," I whispered to Jenna, steeling myself as anxiety clawed at my insides. 1, 2, 3, we lifted Sam up, his weight straining against my arms, but he pushed back against the pain, determination glinting in his eyes. Together, we staggered toward the door. But just as we were about to cross the threshold, it slammed open, backlit by the flickering hospital lights. A figure silhouetted against that harsh neon glow, a piercing threat that loomed larger than life itself. Crawford stepped through the doorway with the confidence of a king surveying his kingdom, and my heart sank like an anchor dragged down deep. His smirk widened, and those dark eyes danced with cruel joy. "You think you can escape?" He chuckled darkly, and the haunting laughter wrapped around our throats, choking back cries of panic. "You've unwittingly played your part in a much larger game. You can't run from the truth of what you've unleashed. Get out of the way." Dr. Gray yelled, his voice steady, but even he faltered slightly in the presence of Crawford. Before I could even think to react, I heard a shattering crash from elsewhere, followed by the splintering sound of glass and a low growl echoing through the corridors that sent chills racing down my spine. The very air pulsed with an imminent threat. An inexplicable fear churned in my stomach, and I turned to Sam, clutching his hand. He was trembling, eyes wide, caught in the web of fear weaved by a monster who had now entwined our fates. "I am sorry, I didn't want any of this," I whispered to him, tears welling in my eyes as urgency clawed at me to act. But the moment hung suspended, heavy with dread, as I realized that we were trapped at the intersection of choices made and horrors yet to come. With no exit in sight and danger lurking all around us, Crawford's presence only seemed to amplify the enclosing darkness. It was too late to turn back, and as I glanced at Jenna, I knew in that breathless pause that something far worse than I could fathom was about to unfold. And then there was a voice, chillingly calm, cutting through the darkness. "You truly don't understand what's about to happen, do you?" In that fraught silence, as we stood poised at the precipice of chaos, I felt my heart drop, the scream I wanted to unleash fading into a whisper of dread. Before I could comprehend the weight of his words, voices from the corridor called for Crawford, a siren of authority that felt like a cruel twist in this eternal nightmare. It was clear now, we were not just fighting for our lives. We were becoming unwilling players in his game. And the darkness was closing in fast. The air shifted, heavy with anticipation as Crawford took a step closer, blocking our path. The intensity in his gaze felt almost tangible, suffocating. I could scarcely believe it. He was our enemy, yet his presence infused a twisted sense of power over the chaos swirling around us. With each word that fell from his lips, a sense of doom wrapped tighter around us like barbed wire. The joy of watching it all unfold like a beautifully orchestrated symphony of despair, he drawled, his voice silky smooth. "You think this is a fight for survival? No, my dear. It is merely a dance, and we are all bound to the music you've unknowingly composed." My heart raced, blood thundering in my ears. It felt as though the darkness he embodied crept closer, trying to reach into my very essence and snuff out the flickering embers of hope. "What do you want from us?" I managed, clenching Sam's hand tighter, wishing I could infuse him with every ounce of determination I possessed. "From you?" He laughed, a sound so cruel it sent shivers down my spine. "It's not about what I want, but what you've already given me. Chaos begets chaos, and you've tapped into something far greater than you realize. Your little escapade has triggered events I can no longer control, and neither can you." Despair clawed at my throat. I was unprepared for this, for his manipulations, and for the horrors that would surely follow. Just as I thought I couldn't bear the weight of his words any longer, a sudden crash shattered the moment, a deafening bang that ripped through the atmosphere, and the fluorescent lights flickered ominously. The pounding footsteps outside grew louder, tensions unraveling beyond the door. In a whirlwind, Jenna's voice broke through the haze of fear. "We need to pull back. There's no reason for us to stand here and play his twisted game." Her eyes darted to the chaos looming just beyond the door, where shadows danced menacingly, but Crawford simply smiled, his confidence unwavering. "Oh, sweet girl. It's far too late to change the tune now. You are already part of my delightful tragedy." It felt as though the air had turned to ice, dread seeped into my veins, paralyzing my ability to think. Yet in a distant corner of my mind, a flicker of defiance ignited. We were not without options. And then, as if on cue, the raucous sounds from the corridor crescendoed, and out of the shadows emerged a new wave of figures swathed in uniforms, a group of paramedics, guns drawn. No. I screamed instinctively, pushing against the gravity of horror that pulled me deeper into an abyss. They couldn't be part of Crawford's monstrous design. They were here for Sam, the lifeline he so desperately needed. Delta Team. Clear the hallway. One of the paramedics shouted, and in that instant, chaos suffocated reason. Sam looked at me, panicked, his face pale, his strength faltering as the grip of life slipped further from his grasp. "We can't stay here." I shouted again, drawing back from the overwhelming presence of Crawford, whose scornful expression only deepened. "You're here for him." I pleaded with the paramedics, desperately pushing Sam toward them, but their eyes were wide with terror, confusion etched into their features as they caught sight of Crawford, the twisted puppet master basking in the calamity. "Dr. Crawford?" One of them stammered, disbelief tinting his tone. "What's happening here?" "Nothing you need concern yourself with," Crawford interrupted, feigning casual indifference, yet his predatory gaze latched onto me. "Trust me, gentlemen, you're better off walking away while you can." My heart raced wildly as uncertainty blossomed around us like a field of sharp thorns. "You can't leave us!" I yelled, emotional desperation spilling out. "He needs immediate medical assistance." I could feel the universe itself constricting. I wasn't ready to let this be the end of our fight. And just then, like the unfurling of a hidden chapter, the paramedics exchanged uncertain glances, as if sensing the gravity of the situation. "We need to secure the area," one of them murmured cautiously, nodding towards the door behind. "Crawford. If there's a risk, get away from him," Jenna shouted, her voice unfolding like a battle cry as she stepped forward, filled with fierce determination. "You can't let him do this. We need to take Sam, even if it means breaking away ourselves." The sudden flare of courage in Jenna's voice lit a spark within me, and I instinctively nodded. That flicker of hope surged through the shared bond of our friendship. This wasn't over, not yet. Unbeknownst to us, the moment hung suspended like a pendulum about to swing, leading us into uncertain territory. In those precious seconds, Sam squeezed my hand tighter, his voice trembling through gritted teeth. "I am not ready," he gasped, the fight within him flickering like a dying flame. Suddenly, the room erupted. A booming sound against the door shattered the tension, as if announcing that fate was about to take a turn. Crawford's features twisted in sudden fury. "You think you can escape? I will finish what I've begun," he roared, and I could sense his power slipping through his fingers as the line between conflict blurred to a point of no return. "Stay with me, Sam," I cried out, the words a desperate mantra laced with everything I feared losing. Then, irrevocably, the door burst open, revealing a dark figure amidst the bluster of bodies. And Chausan, unexpected savior or a more formidable foe? And just like that, our resolve melded with the shifting shadows, as I grasped Sam tighter, holding on for all of us. We were teetering on the edge, and I held my breath, knowing that whatever emerged from the chaos could alter the course of our fate forever. The chaos around us pulsed with an unsettling rhythm as dark shapes spilled through the doorway. My heart pounded against my ribs, each beat echoing the dread that clung like a second skin. For a moment, all I could see were shadows, angry voices rising like a siren song, the air thick with impending conflict. I felt Sam's grip weaken in my palm, and my stomach twisted painfully. This was it. The moment everything could fracture or coalesce. "Get back!" A voice rang out, firm and authoritative, as a group of figures pushed through the throng. Dressed in tactical gear, they were an unsettling mix of calm and urgent, eyes scanning our surroundings like hawks searching for signs of danger. My breath hitched. They looked like the cavalry, yet uncertainty gnawed at me. "It's the paramedics!" someone shouted, and a wave of relief washed over me. "We're here to help," but even in the relief, I felt the weight of Crawford's presence, the malignant smirk still curling on his lips. "You think they can save you?" he taunted, positioning himself like a dam blocking the flood of hope behind him. "You don't comprehend what's at stake." "Enough!" Dr. Gray snapped, stepping into the fray, his voice a commanding force that cut through the noise. "Get Sam out of here. Now!" He pointed toward the paramedics, urgency threading through him as he eyed the doorway that held both promise and peril. With a swift motion, the team moved toward us, ready to hoist Sam onto a stretcher. I was panting now, adrenaline surging through me with a mixture of fear and determination. "He needs immediate treatment," I urged, my voice breaking. Sam's face was pale, his breath shallow, and I could feel the clammy sweat against my palms, but Crawford stepped in front of them, an impermeable wall of malicious intent. "Do you really want to dance with fate, gentlemen? One misstep, one hesitation, and this all crumbles. I can end this. Let me show you the consequences of your insurrection.no." I shouted, stepping forward, defiance surging through my veins. "You won't get to control this anymore, Crawford. You're nothing but a manipulator hiding in the dark. We're not afraid of your games." His laughter cut through the air, sharp and mocking. "Fear is precisely what drives you, my dear. But go ahead, play the hero. You think this is a game? You think you can rewrite the script?" "Let him go," Jenna chimed in, standing beside me, her voice unwavering. "You're not in charge here." "Not anymore." That small glimmer of defiance reverberated through the air, unexpected and bold. I felt the energy shift slightly, a protective barrier forming around us as we confronted Crawford not just as individuals but united against his dark influence. "Reinforcements are on their way," one of the paramedics shuffled forward, eyes piercing through the chaos, silver linings glimmering in the storm. "We can't allow this man to impede our duty to save lives." Crawford's expression hardened. "You're all so naive," he hissed, stepping toward them, menace radiating from his every move, his eyes flashing icy. "This isn't just about survival. It's about the truth you've all tried to bury. What you've set in motion." Another crash resonated from behind us, swallowing the words Crawford attempted to weave. The walls felt as though they were bending closer, the balance tipping precariously toward disaster, but I knew we had to break free, to disrupt the sinister hold he sought to impose. "Sam needs to go," I urged again, desperation dripping from each word. "This moment is ours. We cannot let him dictate our fates." "Hold them," Crawford commanded, his voice laced with authority. He darted toward the paramedics, but in that moment, I pushed through the crowd with Jenna at my side, a string of resolve bound by purpose. "Go." I shouted, and before I could second-guess myself, I felt a rush of adrenaline course through me. I seized Sam's shoulders, pulling him toward the waiting paramedics, every fiber in me screaming for survival, for our newfound chance, for redemption. The world blazed outside that doorway like a spark, and I would not let this storm extinguish our light. In one swift motion, the paramedics scooped Sam onto the stretcher, the room thick with urgency. "Let's move," they cried, and momentum turned the tide. As they whisked him away, I caught a fleeting glance at Crawford's face, a blend of rage and disbelief mingling as he realized the game had shifted beneath his feet, but wrong-footed as he was, I felt something snapping in the air. With every step the paramedics took, I ran alongside them, my heart swelling with hope. Jenna stayed close, squeezing my hand tightly. "We're doing this," she whispered breathlessly, and I felt the warmth of camaraderie enveloping us like a shield. "Dr. Gray," rallied the other staff, and overwhelmed by the chaos, I shouted back towards Crawford, "You will not win. Your lies will crumble." And in that moment of clarity, I understood that forgiveness began here within this whirlwind of fear and choices leading us back towards the light. Despite the scars of our past, we could rise together. Crawford's smirk faltered, confusion painting his face. He roared in fury, but it was too late. The tide was rising, with the sound of feet pounding against the floor. We crossed into uncharted territory, hope blazing against the backdrop of despair. As the renegade army of caregivers pressed forward, our unity became a force that cut through the suffocating darkness. We reached the hospital exit, the sun spilling its golden light over everything, brilliance shining through the cracks of uncertainty. My heart hammered in my chest, but with each breath of fresh air, the shadows began to recede, and it was in that moment of sheer triumph, marveling at the dawn after the storm, I found closure not just for myself, but for every ounce of guilt and fear that had anchored me down. I turned my gaze back toward the hospital entrance, knowing that while the battle had been won, the war would carry on long after today. "Let's go," I whispered to Jenna, the adrenaline surging like a tide. "Together." And as we stepped into the brightness of a new day, I felt a warmth enveloping me, soothing each frayed edge of my soul that we were born from light, reborn from the embers of chaos. And somewhere in the swirling aftermath, I realized forgiveness was not merely an act for others, it was a gift to myself. It was in the embrace of that fleeting realization, in the mix of courage and the life-affirming promise of tomorrow, I finally allowed myself to breathe, and just as I did, I realized that even amidst the darkest storms, hope would always find its way to shine through, because in the end, as I glanced back to see the dazzling blue sky glowing overhead, I understood this one undeniable truth: sometimes, the most powerful rebirth shines brightest from the flames of our mistakes.